How do you make the Bruiserweight Pete Dunne look killer when entering the ring? That's the question. Welcome to Black Country Beast Designs' first ever YouTube video. And what a video we've got today. So, what are we doing? Of course you know what we're doing. You've already read the title and you've already seen the thumbnail. So, you pretty much know what we're doing already. We're making entrance coat for the Bruiserweight himself, Pete Dunne, ready for his big comeback post-corona lockdown. So yeah, that's what we're going to be doing. It's going to be going with a matching singlet, which I've already done. But this is the coat itself, and it's going to be everything from scratch, from the patterning, from the designs, from the cutting, the sewing, everything. You're going to see the whole thing. So if that's something you're going to be interested in, then stay tuned. So, first things first, we're going to be doing a kind of halfway between a draping technique and using patterns. So these patterns that I've got here, these are standard patterns for a large zip-up hoodie. It's a standard zip-up hoodie, and it's a pattern that I've used many times. If you go through Instagram, you'll see all the different times that I've used it. So we have a hood section, we have a front section and a back section. The first thing that we need to do is to transfer these onto this sort of cheap muslin type material, or just a cheap cotton. This I got from a fabric store and it was stained. You can see it's got big marks and stains on it. So this was £1 a metre. So it's probably worth doing that when you go to the fabric stores. Ask them if they've got any damaged fabric. It doesn't have to be muslin, it can be anything. You don't want it too sheer, so nothing like a net or anything like that that's too sheer, or you don't want anything too thick, because you need it to be able to drape over the dummy, which we'll show you in a moment. So yeah, nice and cheap, £1 a metre. I bought 5 metres, and this is going to be more than enough to begin patterning Pete Dunne's coat. We'll be transferring the zip-up hoodie patterns to this and then working out the rest after that. Okay, so things you're going to need, as well as your muslin and your patterns, you need a Sharpie. 1 second. I need a soft tape, and most important thing for me anyway is a wrist pin cushion. I can't stress enough how handy it is to have this on your wrist. It lives on my wrist when I'm sewing. To be able to have access to pins without having to find where they are or take them at the top of the dummy. One of the most handy things you can have, one of my favourite things, and it's also been recovered in this cool lightning fabric there. I keep looking at the screen when I should be looking at you. So, pin cushion, and of course a dummy of sorts. Now this isn't a professional tailor's dummy. It's more of like a stand just for like showing garments on, but they're like £25 each. They come with a stand, they come with a cover. Really, really handy to have. This one just happens to be the perfect chest width for Pete and waist, and I've set the height as well. What I've also done, if you can see here, is I've added a centre front mark, because we're only going to be doing one side. We don't do both sides when you drape him. It's an identical coat. It works. It's the same both sides, so we don't need to drape or design both sides. So a centre front a side seam which goes all the way up to the neck, and centre back as well. And those will be the marks that we'll work to make sure that we get our coat symmetrical. That's the important part, and that's done, prepped. Next thing we're going to be doing is creating the pattern. So, first thing we're going to do is begin to transfer the patterns on to the muslin. This is the front, it's a large, it's already been measured. I know that this works, but what we need to change is, because with a zip-up hoodie, as you can see, tapers here. It starts to taper down. So if we continue this down, it's going to end up really narrow. So what we need to do is, when we transferred the pattern, we need to straighten out these edges so they just become a bit more workable. So, and don't forget, we're only working on one side, we don't need two sides for this. So we're going to lay this down. I have these large washers, which are great for weighing the paper down. Just drop those on. And if I can say also, at this point, this is my way of doing things. I know this isn't necessarily a correct way of doing it. There might be real tailors and seamsters and dressmakers who probably think, what am I doing? But this is my way of doing it. Everything I do is my way of doing it. Don't judge me too harshly. It works for me. It works for the customers. It works for the wrestlers I make clothes for. So why not? So probably cut into a little time lapse now as I draw this out, and then I'll go over what we did after that. Step, we've cut two basic muslin patterns, a front and a back. Sort of eyeballed it because, as I said, it's almost kind of like a draping type technique now. What we're actually going to do is we're going to add it to the dummy. We're going to try and match up the centre, the side and the back, and try and figure that out. See if we need to make any adjustments, if we need to cut anything off, if we need to add anything on. This is the time when you do it. That's why you use this cheap stuff, because it just all ends up in the bin, or as a pressing cloth or something like that, or you can even reuse it as another pattern further on down the line. So I'm going to start with my front, and I've cut it backwards, but it doesn't matter because we just turn it. And we're looking, and I don't know if I said, this is measured to Pete. So I've made sure that it was measured to Pete. Luckily, it's measured perfectly to Pete. If it's not, if it's too small for the person you're making for, you're going to need to pad it out. I'll show that in maybe in another separate video, how to pad out a form and where to pad out a form. It's important that you pad out in the right areas. You don't just sort of pad the whole thing out. It doesn't work like that. And you can there's things you can use, shoulder pads, and there's other things you can use as well to do that, but I'll do that maybe in a separate video. But luckily this happens to be Pete Dunne perfectly. So we do want a little bit of give on the coat, because this dummy is sort of exactly to Pete's size, so you know, as if it looked fitted. We don't want the coat to be fitted, you want a coat to be a little bit baggy, unless they've asked for fitted, which this isn't going to be a fitted coat, it's just going to be a standard sort of loose, sleeveless, hooded, long coat. So, wrist pins, you'll see how handy they are, and I'm going to just drop this on the front, and I'm going to try to match everything up. So if I start on the shoulder, and I'm going to lay that slightly over the shoulder line, so about 1 centimetre over, because you've got to allow for your seam allowance when you sew. And we're literally just going to stab, stab, and stab, and hold that shoulder in. Now you can already see it's quite tight, but hopefully when we move along, we should get somewhere near close. The next thing, you want to work roughly around about the side. Now I want to give a bit of ease, which is when I said you don't want the coat to be fitted, I'm going to give it a little bit of ease. So I don't want to be pulling, stretching the fabric across. Maybe if I was doing a dress or something like that, then you would do more like that kind of thing. But I want it to be quite loose. So I'm giving what is called ease, and I'll just start by beginning to pin. Just put a couple of pins in and just see how things go as you walk along. What I'll do now is we'll do another time lapse. You don't want to sit here watching me put hundreds of pins in and adjusting the fabric. The idea of what we're doing is to just get a basic fitting of this. If we have to trim any off or we have to add any on, and then we'll straighten the pattern or true the pattern, and then we'll cut it on the actual fabric itself. So for now, we'll do a little bit of a time lapse while I dress this dummy, and then we'll go from there. As you can see, I've got quite a lot of extra. I've stopped at this point because I now know that there's at least a good two centimetres. You could go more. I don't know if you can see down there. There's quite a gap. It's not quite on the back, but that will come good when we straighten the pattern, we straighten the front, or we true the pattern, depending on how you want to say it. The shoulders seem to be fine. They're nice. They fit nice. They will do anyway once we've tidied everything up. We have got quite a lot of bulk here. So what I will do now is take these off and trim them down, and that will get me somewhere close. Then what I will do is trace these back out onto the muslin again, cut them, and then we should have our final patterns sorted from there. So that's the next step. Okay, so that's done. So what I didn't film that bit because we'd already been through it. I took the patterns off, I trimmed that centimetre or probably just slightly over. That also trued up the edge, so it tidied the edge nice. I did the same for the bottom, and I just tied it up around the side. I did have to make a slight adjustment to the neck hole, but that's something I've known about for a while on this pattern, and I always correct it every time. So I thought this is a good opportunity to correct that neck hole now on the pattern, and I don't have to keep doing that every time now. So the next step is we're going to sew it up, because even when you pin it to the form, when you wear a coat, you don't stick it to your body. It's not stuck to your body, it hangs on your body. So the next step is to sew it. We'll see this, we'll know what the seam allowance is, we'll know if everything matches up, if everything fits. There is a hood section to this. Where's the hood? Bear with me 1 second. I've put it down somewhere, but there is a hood. I didn't add that to the form because I know that the hood fits this, and a hood is a hood. You know, we will make one slight correction to the hood, but I'll show you that in a minute when we get to it. The hoods always have a kind of, I tend to find they're a little bit peaked, so I'm just going to round the top of that hood off. Hood is a real simple thing to sew, and it looks great, but it's such a simple thing. 2 pieces, one length of stitches. I'm trying to look for, I think it's blown on the floor, but I'll sort it out after we've sewed. So next up, we're going to sew. We're just going to use, for this, we'll just use a standard straight stitch, nothing fancy. Just some cheap white thread, nothing too fancy. It'll be time-lapsed. Again, you don't want to see me having to sit there and sew everything on, and then we'll put it on the form again. We'll see how it hangs, and if all's good, then we can get the proper fabric out and the lining, and start to cut the actual thing. So, time lapse of sewing. A few tack-in stitches in, just real. I haven't sewn it all the way down, just a few little stitches here or there, because I need to take this apart, because obviously this is the pattern. I don't want to sew the whole thing up and then have to unpick the whole thing. So I've sewn the shoulder and I've sewn intervals down. I'm pretty happy with this. It sits nicely down the front, the neckline comes down nice. This will naturally sort of open when Pete wears it. That's what you want to happen, because it's got, I haven't shown you the fabric yet, sorry you can't see. I haven't shown you the, sit down. I haven't shown you the fabric yet. We're using a faux leather and a really, really great high quality fur. Wait till you see this fur, it's beautiful fur. Faux fur, fake fur by the way, and faux leather. So yeah, it's sitting nicely on the front here, all the way up to the neckline. We go to the side. Can you see? Yeah. It's got a nice bit of give in the side, so it's not figure hugging. We've got that nice bit of give, because obviously it's a coat. It's not a dress or or a fitted jacket or anything like that. It's a coat. You want it to hang quite loose. The shoulders line up now. Now I've tucked that little bit off. May need to trim a little bit off the hood, but I can work that after. The back. Oops, it's come off. The back will sit nicely. Still giving you that bit of still giving you that little bit of give or ease, as it's also known. It's not going to be too tight, and I'm happy with that. We know it's going to work with the seam allowance because it's folded under these points, and it's still got a nice bit of give. Arms are fine. I'm happy with that. Now, I know I'm not claiming to be in any way good at draping. I am not in any way good at this. I actually watched I've watched every video by Nick Verios from his fashion school on YouTube. I recommend, if you're interested in doing this, go watch that video. He's brilliant, such a good character as well, such a nice guy. And I have done some draping at where I work at school. We've made dresses and things, which worked out quite well. But I'm in no way am I in any way trained or expert at all, or do I even claim to be, to do this. I just do what works, you know. And that's pretty much how I did this whole business, is keep going until it works, you know. And then getting good at something is just failing less. He's making less mistakes as you go. This technique is such a good technique for making anything really. Patterns are great, and I use patterns all the time. I have hundreds of patterns for singlets, trunks, knee pads, kick pads, everything you can think of. Tights, shorts, bikers, everything you can think of. But a pattern, and what it took me a while to get my head around, and I actually spoke with a seamstress, a very big, you know, quite a well-established seamstress. She told me that a pattern is the blueprint, and you're the architect. So a pattern isn't going to fit everybody. It's not. It doesn't matter if someone says I'm a 32 or I'm a small or medium. Excuse me. That pattern isn't going to work. I guarantee you it will never work. You have to make your amendments on that pattern. You have to. It's the only way. It's the only way you can do it. Kick pads. All my kick pads are made for that person. I do not have a standard kick pad template. Every single one of my kick pads are made from scratch, measured and made from scratch. I keep that person's pattern. Obviously, if that person wants it again, then I use the same pattern, but the initial pattern is made from scratch. Same with knee pads, same with tights, with trunks. Everything is measured and made for that person. You can't just go and grab a 32 and go for it. I've done that in the past, and they've come back, you know, in the early days. Of course, you know, I've made mistakes. You learn from those mistakes, and you learn that your patterns are your blueprints. You're the architect. You have to create the shape. And that works with anything, whether you're making a coat, whether you're making a dress, you're making anything. So yeah, I'm hello, yes, so sorry, somebody just decided to ring me right in the middle of that video and cut off my video, so I didn't record the end of what I was just saying. What I was just going to say on the end, after I've been waffling on, we are now going to take this apart, bring out the materials that we're going to be using, the faux fur and the faux leather, and we're going to start cutting out the actual parts. That's what I was going to say before somebody rang me. Maybe that's a YouTube tip for me, is to turn my data off, or my cell whatever off, so I can not get disturbed during the middle of videos. So yes, that's the next step. Okay, so the sample has been unpicked, we're done on that. Just going to quickly go over the materials that we're using and how to buy them really. I know it sounds a bit strange, but especially with faux, well, with faux fur and faux leather, it's the same. You've really got to, if you can go to a store and get this, go to a shop, I would recommend you do that. If you order this online, 9 times out of 10 it's going to be black faux leather. That's it. That's what the description you're going to see is black faux leather. There are so many different types of faux leather. I don't think I've ever ordered faux leather and it's been the same type of faux leather. And there's certain types you really want for certain jobs. Kick pads, you want quite a thick, you want a thick faux leather. because you use heat and you have to shape the leather. If it's thin, it's just going to melt and it's not going to hold its shape. Kick pads, you want thick faux leather. For trousers, I've done sort of faux leather trousers not that long ago, if you look on my Instagram. For that you want really light faux leather, but you've got to be careful with light faux leather because if it pulls, it will crack away. The leather part, the plastic leather part, will break away from the backing. So you've got to be careful of that as well. Don't buy cheap. I guess is the way to go. I mean, you can buy cheap up to a certain point. I mean, you don't want to go spending a fortune on faux leather because, you know, it is pretty much all built the same. But kick pads, knee pads, you want thick. Trousers, any type of trousers, you want thin. The coats, you want in between. If it's too thick on a coat, it's not going to hang, it's not going to drop, it's going to be sort of like it's made of cardboard and it's kind of going to stick out and it's not going to move. If it's too thin, it's going to look like a costume coat, you know, like something you buy from a costume store, you know, in the packets, and it's not going to look good. I go for this in between. I get this from a place in Birmingham, a fabric store in Birmingham, and it's perfect. It's strong, it's nice and thick, but it's soft. It's really soft. You can see how it wants to fall. That's the kind of leather you want. It's got a nice, I don't know if you can see, it's got a nice pattern to it. It's thin, you know, it cuts nice, but it's strong. You can see it's strong and it's soft. That's what you want for a coat. Now, for the best and the most messiest part is the fur. I'm not going to take this all the way out yet because it gets everywhere. It literally gets everywhere. So I'll just try and take it a little bit out. Can you see? Angle that down. This is the fur we'll be using for the lining. I mean, look at that. That's just, you know, I mean, that's next level. If you wish you could feel that, just to feel. I think this is called grey wolf. It's a long pile. Furs are measured like on the pile. This is a really long, thick pile. I mean, you're talking well over an inch of pile. Just comes on a wall back, and it's just, I mean, it's just fantastic. Cheap foam, you can tell it's cheap foam. You don't buy cheap foam if what you're making is, you know, means something to you, or it's an important, you know, costume or even garment, whatever. Don't buy cheap. This is very, very expensive, very expensive. But you know, look at what you're getting. I mean, it's just, you know, you can't, you know, you ain't gonna get any better than that for faux. I mean, it moves. It's soft. It's got a thick pop. Deep down, it's really thick, like when it's like fur, like animal fur. You know, it's thicker at the base, and then it tethers. You know, fades. You know, it's fantastic fur. That's our lining. The faux leather is the outer part. Yeah, this will cover my workshop in fur for the next 6 months. But yeah, no, that's it. That's the price you pay. So let's get cutting. With the front of your coat, fold your material, whatever it is, and cut and then cut. Lay the pattern and cut, because you want two opposite sides. So make sure that you fold in on itself or out on itself, it doesn't matter, it's a symmetrical design. That way you'll get two pieces that are opposite. If you cut, which I've done many times, is cut one piece and then I cut another piece the same side, it's completely wrong when you try to assemble it. So tip is to fold your fabric, don't cut it on the fold, cut away from the fold, because you want two separate pieces for the front. With the back, you cut on the fold. With the front, two separate pieces. And then just begin cutting. Okay, so we're back on with the fur. Now, it's very different with cutting fur than it is with cutting any other fabric. Absolutely, under no circumstances, use the rotary cutter. Do not use the rotary cutter on fur. You'll cut straight through the pile and it'll just look a mess. You want these long bits to be hanging out from the coat. You don't want a clean cut edge on there. Absolute no-no. And you also don't cut on a fold. It's too thick to cut on a fold. So with the back, you need to draw. Oh, by the way, the opposite way around. Do not try and even attempt to cut from the front. Everything is done from the back. Now, because this is expensive, I'm going to get as much space as possible without going over the edge. This tends to be one edge. Can we see? This edge, you'll see it's got like little holes and it's kind of matted. You want to stay away from that edge. That's like the sort of raw edge. You don't want that. So come in about a centimetre from that. Now, with fur, because with any fabric that's cost a lot of money and you don't want to have to go and buy more, draw everything out before you cut, because then you know that you're going to have enough. You're going to have enough fur. If you start cutting it, you might get to one piece where it doesn't quite fit, but it would have fit if you'd have moved everything over and adjusted everything. Back piece, we need to draw one half, flip it, draw the other half. We don't cut on a fold like we did with the other one. It's too thick and it's not going to be accurate enough to do. So I'm going to draw around all my pieces now, and we'll do that on a time lapse because we don't need to hear me doing that. Once I've got all my pieces drawn, we'll be drawing round the patterns with a Sharpie, something that you can see. This blue is perfect, you can see that perfectly. Once you have them all laid out, then I'll come back and we'll go through how you cut fur without cutting through the pile. So That's the next step. Okay, so all my pieces are cut on. As you could see from there, I had to sort of move everything around a little bit to try and make everything fit. I'm not sure what this is. I'm going to speak to the supplier about that, because I'm pretty sure that is the width I paid for, so that's not acceptable. That could have, you know, that could have ruined my day if I hadn't have had these hoods. I mean, you can see I, you know, just about managed to get all that on, so I'm not very happy about that. So probably another tip there: always check that your fabric is what you've asked for, especially when you're ordering it online. So, cutting fur, and for the mess, get ready for the mess. First of all, number one. So I'd marked the front. Can you see here? I've marked these as fronts because what I don't want to do is cut this as one piece. I've done them together in the middle, but we'll cut up that line. On the back piece, we want to cut that out in one go. This is where you need to keep your wits about you and not daydream off, because you could easily just cut that in half thinking it's the front. That's my back. And if I mark back right across the two pieces, then I'm going to know that to cut that out as a whole. Right, cutting fur. If you, let me get this into shot. Okay, I'm going to sit down for this bit. If you take a pair of scissors and just cut this fur down like that, what happens is, can you see here? You cut the pile. You completely cut the pile and you lose that nice fluffy edge. We don't want to do that. So when you cut fur, did I say foam? Fur. You want to put the tip of your scissors into the depth of the pile, right into the depth. So you're not cutting, I don't know how good this is showing up, you don't want to cut sort of right the way across. You want to get the tip of your scissors in to the backing of the fur and snip, little snips. And then if you sort of slightly push up and you only want the tips of your scissors, just the tips, and snip, bringing the scissors up, and what happens, you see the difference? Compared to that flat cut that we had just, you maintain that nice pile. Can you see? Can I get a better view? You maintain that pile on the edge. That's how you cut fur. It can be a pain. Either way, you're going to be covered in fur. It's going to be everywhere. So once I've cut these out, we'll time lapse that again. Once we've cut this out, I'll have a quick tidy up and I'll come back to you for the next part, which is adding Pete's bear logo on the back, which is a whole job in itself. So let's get cutting, let's get tidying. length of this video, I've decided to split it into two, give you all a bit of a break. So this is the end of part one.